Welcome, everyone. I'm Carolyn Taylor, and I'm delighted that you're here to see another segment of Alive to Thrive, Living Spiritually with Cancer. We're here today to talk about a topic that's very unique to us in the cancer community, and that's fear. Fear that comes from the different things that we're going to have to deal with in cancer. I would just like to ask a question because I'm sure many of you are out there thinking, I have cancer. And have you ever looked in the mirror and said to yourself, I have cancer, I'm scared, and I don't know what to do next? I'll raise my hand to that one. I truly didn't know what to do next. And that was such a surprise to me. And today we're going to talk about the idea of where are all these fears coming from. Dig deep to really kind of root out where all this special fear from cancer is coming and find ways to diminish it, to live with it, and almost come to the point where we can not quite be friends with it, but certainly we can manage it in our lives. I know that I was not given a roadmap when I got my cancer, and I know that I needed it. And if it makes any of us feel any better, approximately 18 million people every year are newly diagnosed with cancer. 18 million. I don't know the exact number of how many of them say they're afraid, but I have a feeling a substantial amount of people really understand that this is a journey that they weren't prepared for. I understand that. And the reason I understand that is I'm one of those 18 million. And before we get further into our program, I want to say that I'm not a medical professional. I'm not a psychologist or therapist. What I'd like you to think of me as is a cancer coach, someone that has been through it. Try to figure out ways to minimize the pain and the suffering that I went through, but yet you don't have to. We can do some, I can't say shortcuts, but we can do some work together so that your journey through cancer doesn't have to be in a dark room feeling for the doorknob and you can't find your way out. My goal today is to break down some of the components of cancer. It really helps to understand what the cancer journey includes. The first thing that we need to understand that cancer is a physical journey. I think we all kind of understand that intrinsically, and that we have to find the strength every day to move forward with our lives. What I didn't know about cancer and the physical part of it is that it makes every fear I've ever had about physical pain come to the fore in my life because they're all unique experiences that I've never had before. For example, I never had a CT scan before cancer. I never had an NG tube down my throat for my birthday before cancer. I never had neuropathy or a port. These were all new physical sensations and really unknowns in my life. And to get myself to say, okay, this is another new day, what's going to happen today, is really frightening. So we do have to come to terms with the fear of cancer and what it's going to do to us physically. And one of the things that I found I did in my life is I started separating out my life into two pieces. BC, which was before cancer. Never had to think about any of this stuff. And now there's AD, after diagnosis. And this is now part of my new life. And we have choices. And one of the choices we learn to have to make is to accept that there's going to be new procedures in our life, things that we don't really know about. And what we can do to make it easier for ourselves is to ask questions. How long will this take? What's it going to feel like? Am I going to have to do this every week, every day? And the more we can ask to fill in the gap of what's going to happen to our physical bodies will take away some of that physical fear. So that's the first place where we start. The second place is the mental portion of cancer. I had the unfortunate fortune to be diagnosed with cancer 3 times in 1 year. And I wasn't ready for it emotionally the first time. And I thought, well, maybe the second time I'll be able to handle a little bit better, or the third time. And it just wasn't true. Each time I got on this roller coaster, emotional roller coaster of not knowing what to do with everything that was coming at me. And I didn't have time to actually get settled. And one of the reasons I didn't is because our brain loves certainty. And cancer takes us out of that comfort zone and says, you don't have certainty anymore. There's nothing better than the human brain waking up saying, I walk the dog at 7, I have my first cup of coffee at 7:20, I'm at work by 8, I have a meeting at 9, I have my budget meeting with the rest of the team at 10:30, and I have lunch at 1. Ooh, We love that. We love our souls. I have problems. I know how to solve them because this is what I do all day. What cancer does is say, there's going to be questions that you're going to have to live with that you don't have answers to or solutions to, at least not right away. And some of those questions sound like this. Will this treatment work for me? Will this treatment hurt? How long am I going to have to do this treatment? And is this treatment even going to save my life? Those are pretty heavy questions that any human being has to ask in a given day. And yet there we are with cancer. Those are the new unknowns that we have to fill. And what happens when we have unknown in our brain, it's like an empty jar. Think of it as an empty jar. And there's all this space in there. Well, our minds don't like empty spaces, so we fill it. We will fill it. And what do we fill it with? We fill it with fear. We fill it with negative thoughts. We fill it with all the bad things we ever thought cancer was ever going to be. And suddenly, this is where we get into problems with our minds and cancer. We don't know how to deal with this overload of information coming from healthcare and non-information about what our lives and our future is really going to look like. Ironically, we all live with the unknown. We just don't have to acknowledge it. And that's the beauty of our lives, that we can go and get in a car and drive to work and drop the kids off to school and do everything. And we pretend like everything is going to be just fine because we know how it's all going to turn out. We don't, but we pretend we do. And that's what gets us through every day at a time. Cancer kind of comes up from behind and just slaps you in the face and says, okay, you have no more certainty now. That's where cancer then suddenly creates emotional problems for us because we're in a place that we don't want to be and we don't know how to handle that. But we can, and what we're going to learn as part of the talk today is what we can do about that to bring that emotional fear from a huge, huge thing in our lives to something that's so much more manageable. And that is just a really important place that we all need to stop for a minute and think, yes, I can change my emotional roller coaster ride by changing how I'm thinking about my cancer. And that the unknown does not have to be filled with every negative thought I've ever had. It can be filled with lots of new thoughts, and we're going to talk about more of what those wonderful ideas are going to be. And the third type of journey that we take with cancer is a spiritual one. It may not start out real pretty. I know my spiritual journey with cancer started out, please God, make this go away. And that will sustain you for about a half a minute. And then you have the rest of your cancer treatment and the rest of your life to work on it. And that's just not good enough. And I realized that there are so many tools in our spiritual toolkit that we can add. And some of them you're familiar with, such as meditation and prayer and group prayer. There's no question about that. But there's lots of other ideas and simple things that we can do that I had never heard of before. And it kind of taps into that idea that I'm not my cancer. I'm still a person. I'm still a soul that's living a different life than just my body. And I need to acknowledge that. I need to make sure that I'm in touch with all of me, not just the physical part or the fear part in my brain. And that's where the spiritual practices come in to balance all of this out so that we can get through this difficult time. And I think that's really an important thing that I really never understood. I did a deep dive into fear because I kept thinking, well, there's more than one fear going on here. What am I feeling? What is going on? And what I understood to happen was there's acute fear. And there's an upside to acute fear. It's that alarm that goes off in your head and says, there's danger. And we get that acute fear when we hear we have cancer, but it even works to our advantage before. Like, oh, that's that lump in my neck. That's not right. That shouldn't be there. Or, I've been really fatigued for the past 2 or 3 months. I just can't ignore it anymore. I have to go. Or the other part of it is that that really bad pain and it shouldn't be there. I have to go to the doctor. I have to go get something done about this. That's what acute fear does. It pushes us to action. And it pushes us to get to a place where we're looking for help, where we're looking for a place that will guide us to medical care and diagnosis and get us to where we know what we're dealing with so that we can proceed. Those are the short-term benefits of acute fear. The only problem with acute fear is you can't live there. It's meant to be a short-term benefit. You're not supposed to spend the rest of your life on the ceiling clinging like a cat. And that's what acute fear really is. So we can get past that once we get our diagnosis and things calm down a little bit. But what I found crept in later, and it was kind of insidious, but it crept in over time and it got bigger and bigger. And that is chronic fear. Chronic fear is when you wake up every morning and you say to yourself, oh my God, I have cancer and I'm going to die. I know I'm going to die and I have cancer. And it overwhelms every aspect of your brain, your life, your body, your family. You just can't move. It's just too much. That's chronic fear. And when it doesn't go away, it just becomes something that is not a positive in your life. And that one of the things I found with acute fear, it becomes contagious, that people pick up on your fear in your face and your movements, and you have to then face your coworkers and your family and your friends to tell them you have cancer. And they see the fear in your face and they mirror it back to you. Wow, you've just created a very unhealthy environment for you, yourself, and your cancer. And that's why it's important. The first thing we'd have to deal with is to understand that we have this chronic fear and we need to actually address it. The reason we have to address it is not just because it doesn't feel good. It diminishes our immune system and our capability to fight not only cancer, but any disease that comes our way. It also diminishes our mental health. We don't wake up in a good mood, and we can't handle the stress of all the other things that are coming our way with our treatments and our reactions to our treatments. And finally, it affects our decision making. When I'm under stress, I don't make my best decisions, and I know that. And yet, here you are in a place where you have to make good decisions. They're your decisions about your life and death. And chronic fear is something that is not going to help you get to where you need to go. So what we need to do is identify, yes, I have this, yes, they're there, and I need to see that so that I can keep moving forward in my journey to make it lighter and better. So beyond the two major fears, I added the third one because that's what happened to me. And I call it my night crawlers, my night fear. And I was doing okay throughout the day because the rhythm of life was going. It was just wonderful. You could hear birds chirping and school buses and cars and dogs barking. And even if you weren't participating because of your disease or your treatment, you still felt the world was on a normal beat. You could feel the rhythm and the beat of life. But then what happened to me as night started to come and as the quiet came into the world and everyone starts to go to bed, you suddenly find yourself alone with your thoughts. And they're not necessarily good thoughts. And what happens is that I know I don't have my best thoughts between 12 and 5 a.m. And everyone's sleeping around me and there's no one to validate what's going to happen to me. And I just have to sit there alone with my own thoughts. And it just had to stop. And I realized that because I needed the sleep to heal my body and to heal my mind. And yet it wouldn't allow me to do that. And so the denial that I could get through the day just suddenly stopped at night. And I just felt that this was a special cancer fear that I never had before. I wasn't afraid to close my eyes because I was afraid that if I closed them, I wouldn't wake them up. They wouldn't open up the next morning. And that was a new and unusual fear that cancer brought to me. And I realized at this point I was getting stuck in a fearful mindset. And I was going to think my way out of it. And I kind of did. I learned that trauma sticks in your brain much longer than something pleasant. And when you hear you have the word cancer, it's a punch in the gut, right in the solar plexus. And that stays in your brain because that's trauma. If someone says, oh, you look nice today, or isn't the weather lovely? That's not life-threatening. That's not going to stay in your brain as the key point of the day. So that the diagnosis of cancer, that awareness that I'm dealing with this every day, is trauma in my brain. And then I have this empty space of the unknown, and I filled it with all these lovely negative thoughts. And suddenly those two loop together. You have the strong emotion, and then I'm feeding it with my negative thoughts. My negative thoughts make that strong emotion even stronger, and suddenly you're in this endless loop. And sometimes it's really hard to break, to find out what to do about that and what to do next. And one of the things we have to do next is to say, don't talk to me like that. The words that we hear, that we fill in the blank spaces with, are coming from our mind. I have to say that no doctor said to me, you have cancer, you're going to die. No doctor said to me that you need to stay up all night worrying because that's really going to help your cancer. No one ever said that everyone's going to hate you and you're going to lose all your friends because you have cancer now and you're going to lose your job and everything is just going to completely fall apart. No one said those words to me. You know who was saying it to me? Me. And that's where we have to empower ourselves and to say that we have fears. Yes, we're allowed to have fears because we have cancer, but we don't have to get caught there. And if we can take 1 nanosecond between the terrible thought that we have, realizing, whose thought is that? Is that mine? Oh yeah, I own that one. It can visit me for a minute, but I'm going to put that aside. I don't want it to stay with me all day or all night. And I love the idea that it's quoted by Dr. Rob Pennington. He said that you can't control your initial response to anything, but you can control how long it stays with you. You can't control the fact that all of a sudden you just remember, oh my gosh, I have cancer, and get a little nervous, a little anxious about it. It's okay. But you as a human being gets to decide how long that thought is going to stay and live with you that day and that night, which means you can empower yourself and change your life by saying, whose thought is that and how long do I want it to visit? You can give it a name, saying, Fred's here again. He's annoying. He's making me really, really scared. Thank you for visiting. I'm busy now. I'm going to go do something else. And just realize what you're doing with your life is really interior in your head, and that is the way that you can start this process of making cancer something that is doable and livable. And not only that, but you get to live your life and learn how to thrive. You just don't sit there looping in a mindset that isn't going to feed you and bring you joy. You're going to find a new place where you can find peace in the middle of a storm. And it starts with your mind and control of those thoughts, understanding that this is part of the cancer process. This is not personal. This is not just you. This is human nature, and this is how we can slowly break down cancer into chewable bits so that our lives can be something special. Let's go from alive to thrive by taking it apart bit by bit and practicing this. Namaste. Thank you.